In the days of myth and legend, in ancient Greece, there was a sprawling city called Tyana. It wrapped around a towering hill like flowers around an altar, and it was full of the richest folks in the ancient world. These were people who had so much money that they would never have to work another day in their lives, and neither would their kids, or even their kids' kids for that matter. They could buy a village with the same easy air you might use to buy a loaf of bread. And if they dropped a piece of gold on the ground, it was hardly worth their time to stop and pick it up. Coming together in Tyana, the rich took their money and had built the most beautiful houses you've ever seen. They were mansions of smooth marble, all veined with gold, richly appointed as any palace. The woodwork was carved in the shape of flowering vines, so detailed and fine it looked alive. Their gardens were overflowing with grapes and olives, their closets with silk and fur, and their cups with juice and honey. They had more than anyone could ever need, more than anyone could ever spend, and they meant to keep it that way, no matter what. High above Tyana, on the holy peak of Mount Olympus, Zeus, the king of the gods, watched with growing anger.
"Look at these greedy fools,"
he bellowed to everyone and no one in particular.
"They've had all the luck in the world and they keep it all for themselves. We gave these riches for the people of Greece to share, not for these misers to keep clutched in their pampered fists."
"Well, what can we do about it?" asked Hermes, the speedy messenger of the gods. He was so used to moving fast that even his words ran together in a jumble. "You want to rain down a little fire and flood? Maybe an eagle to eat their livers, or they could push a big rock forever and ever, or something like that?" Zeus looked down at Tyana and shook his head.
"There are too many people to judge them all at once,"
he said, stroking his luxurious beard, silver like a storm cloud.
"Let's go down and pay them a visit. See how they fare when they're given a chance to be generous for once."
That's an excellent idea. Just let me go and get my disguise. I can't wait. I love walking among the mortals. This is going to be so good, so good, so good, so good. Zeus laughed and the pair got ready. With their magic, they disguised themselves as poor men down on their luck and desperate for a meal. Their robes were frayed and faded, their stomachs rumbling, and their sandals all but unraveled. "Let's go!" shouted Hermes, leading the way down to Tyana. The gods appeared just outside of the city and walked in, dusty from the road. They staggered up to the first mansion they saw and knocked on the door. It opened a crack, and they saw a man inside give a snooty huff.
"And what do you want?" "We are lost travelers,"
Zeus said, his fake voice weak and shaky.
"We've not eaten in weeks, and we are so very tired. Do you perhaps have a bit of food to spare?"
"Darling, who is at the door?" came a voice from deeper in the mansion.
"Just some beggars,"
the man called back.
He turned again to the door. "We have nothing for the likes of you. Now get off my property before I let the hounds out on you."
With that, the door slammed in their faces. Not very polite. Not very polite at all," said Hermes. "You'd think someone as rich as this could spare a bite of bread, but no, they have to keep it all for themselves. Gods forbid they help, or else who knows what kind of riffraff would be out in the world surviving as best they can. These greedy rich make me sick."
"Me too," agreed Zeus with a scowl. "Hopefully their neighbors are better behaved."
"Still not too late to eat their livers," Hermes joked. Zeus grunted, and they pushed on down the wide, tree-lined streets to the next mansion. This time, they were simply shouted at through the door and told to keep on moving. They thought that would be the worst of it, but a few mansions later, someone actually shot an arrow at them through an upstairs window. It didn't hit them, but it was enough for Zeus to snarl and crackle with lightning, making Hermes pull him away before he blew their disguises. On and on they went to mansion after mansion all over Tyana, and despite all their riches, the people shared nothing. A few homes even had the remnants of dinner still on the table, Scraps big enough to feed a family being tossed in the trash, and even they wouldn't feed the starving men.
"This greed is truly madness," Zeus rumbled. "The entire town is spoiled rotten and can't see any further than their own golden doors."
They kept going, and finally came upon a lonely little cottage on the outskirts of the city, nestled into the woods of the mountain. It was plain as can be, especially compared to the mansions that sprawled out around the rest of the city. The walls were simple logs, the roof was thatched with straw, and a single curl of cheery smoke came from a crude stone chimney.
"What's this?" Zeus asked. "Some old camp house?"
"I don't know. Maybe we should knock and see," said Hermes. "We've come this far. We might as well see if anyone is inside. Who knows? Maybe it's someone with a little kindness, finally."
"Probably another too-rich miser out here pretending to rough it. But we'll see."
They knocked on the door and heard a voice immediately. "Hello? Is someone there?" Unlike the mansions, the door to the cottage opened wide. In the doorway was an old husband and wife. It was getting dark out, and it seemed they had just lit some candles and were settling in.
"Oh, sorry to bother you," said Zeus, still in disguise, of course. "We were lost in the woods, no food for weeks. Please, if you have anything to spare."
"Oh, you poor dears," said the wife. "Come inside and have something to eat." "We couldn't impose," said Hermes. "Just some bread crust to eat outside would be plenty."
"Nonsense," said the man. "I'm Philemon, but you can call me Phil. This is my wife, Baucis. We don't have much, I'm afraid, but what we have is yours."
He stepped back and waved Zeus and Hermes in. The gods in disguise entered and were ushered to the couple's small wooden table. Baucis got them glasses, and Phil fetched a couple of extra chairs so they could all sit down together. "Ah, here's the juice," said Phil, setting down an earthen jug. "Just a little left, but you're welcome to it." They all shared a cup, and then Baucis jumped up. "Oh, but you're starved! Let us make you something to eat."
"A little bread would be plenty," said Zeus.
"Nonsense," said Phil. "Honey, why don't you get these fellows a bowl of stew, and I'll throw on that side of bacon we've been saving." "You really don't have to," said Hermes. "Not another word," said Baucis, putting a bowl of watery stew down. "This was our dinner. It's thin but tasty. It'll hold you over until the bacon is done." The soup was as good as advertised, and soon both gods were slurping it up. As they ate, they looked around the little cottage. It was humble, but seemed warmer than any of the mansions. Small pieces of art and carvings lined the shelves. The tallow candles were fat and bright, and woven rushes acted like a thick carpet. More than all that, though, the welcoming smiles of the hosts made the house a home. Phil laughed at Zeus's joke and then poured everyone another glass of juice. He started with the guests, thinking there couldn't be much left, but to his surprise, he filled every cup to the brim. By that point, the bacon was done and the air was filled with the crispy, crackling smell of it. Baucis brought out a tablecloth and a full pot of their precious salt and set the table up properly. Phil fed a few of the logs to their little fire and soon had it burning merrily, making the air in the room like a warm blanket. They ate the rest of the stew and the bacon, telling stories and laughing. It was a simple meal, but it was warm and filling, and there was even dessert. The old couple went into their storeroom and pulled out some dried apples and pale golden honeycomb they had been saving for a special occasion. It was the best meal Zeus or Hermes had had in years, not because of the food, but because it was so generously given.
"May I have another cup of juice?" asked Zeus.
"Sorry, I think we're all out," said Baucis.
"Check again," Zeus said with a wink.
The old couple gasped as their jug was refilled in the blink of an eye. "Magic," said Phil. "That was magic." "Who are you?" asked Baucis. Zeus and Hermes looked at each other and smiled. In an instant, they had let their costumes drop and were standing tall as glowing rods.
"Zeus," said Phil, falling to his knees. "Hermes, forgive us for the small dinner."
"It was all we had," agreed Baucis.
"We have a chicken for eggs,"
said Phil. "Let me cook it for you."
"Not necessary," said Zeus. "We've been to 100 houses today, and 100 doors were slammed in our faces. Across Tyana, all the rich people in their mansions wouldn't give us a scrap, and you two, with less than all of them, opened your home to us."
"It was unbelievably generous," said Hermes. "You went and fed us not just stew, and it was pretty good stew too, but also bacon, and then your last bit of juice. I couldn't believe it. All those rich people were like, I'm so rich, and you're getting punished, but not you two, and you two get rewarded for being so kind."
"Oh, thanks," said Baucis. "No, thank you," said Zeus. "Now, follow us to the top of the mountain."
Phil and Baucis looked at each other and shrugged. It was the middle of the night, but the moon was bright, and who were they to say no to the gods? Together, the strange group left the cottage and climbed the winding trail up the mountain that sat in the center of Tyana. As dawn broke, they found themselves on the summit, overlooking the sprawling mansions below.
"Now," said Zeus, rolling up his sleeves, "look at what happens to those who hoard their wealth and live in greed."
He cracked his knuckles and then raised his hands dramatically. Thunder roared and a bolt of lightning struck the base of the mountain. In an instant, the ground turned to a soggy swamp. The swamp spread to the nearest mansion, the soaking ground engulfing it completely. In moments, the mansion had sunk into the murky waters, leaving nothing but bubbles and a few confused residents swimming among the scum.
"You sunk their house," said Baucis.
"Not just them," said Hermes, laughing. They turned and saw it was true. The swamp was spreading around the mountain, swallowing every mansion and spitting out the people that lived there. In just a few minutes' time, the sprawling city of Tyana was gone. Wait, no. There was one building still standing. With shock, Baucis saw it was their own humble cottage. "We've left your home, of course," said Hermes. "But I feel like just leaving your home and getting rid of your greedy neighbors isn't enough. We need to give you another reward, just a little something extra. Of course, you've earned it." Hermes wiggled his ears, and their cottage began to change. The walls fell and rose like waves. The wood rippled and turned to marble, the thatched roof to gleaming gold, and their little garden to wondrous orchards.
"You've shown you don't need wealth," said Zeus, "and in your honor, your little cottage shall now be a temple. All I ask is that you continue living there as you always have, giving generously of its gifts."
"Of course," said Baucis, and Phil smiled like the sun. And from that day on, the couple lived in the temple. They shared the fruit from the orchards, and they shared the roof when it rained. They shared the heat of their fire and the warmth of their smiles. They were kind and caring as they had always been, and so they received one final gift. When it was time for them to pass on to the afterlife, they asked only to remain together at the temple instead. Zeus, to honor their request, let them turn into 2 trees, a gnarled oak and a leafy linden. The 2 plants grew intertwined with each other into a single towering tree, one that still looks over the temple to this very day. The end.